Ladies and gentlemen, from Mount Juliet, Tennessee, it's the Charlie Daniels Band.
Hi, I'm Charlie Daniels, and I love my job playing music. You know, the music industry and the cargo handling industry seem like they're worlds apart, but our jobs are a lot closer than you might think. We both have to work with a lot of heavy containers. We both need to know all about the equipment to be successful, and we both have to work with our teams in order to rock.
This program is part one of a three-part series on the safe operation of shoreside container gantry cranes. In part one, we will look at why the shoreside container gantry crane came to be used at the marine terminal. The crane's characteristics will be discussed, as well as how it functions. You will learn about container ships, the terminal environment, and the longshore team. The controls and indicator lights in the operator's cab will be introduced. And lastly, you will learn some crane safety regulations. In part two, we'll cover the steps you need to take before operating the crane movements, and basic cargo handling. Methods of communicating with ground personnel will also be discussed. Part three will describe container ships in greater detail, review how to handle special containers, and explain how to use special gear. We'll also discuss safety procedures, unusual work conditions, and how to respond to emergencies. Lastly, you will learn how to end your shift properly. This training series is part of your overall crane operator training program. It is intended to provide an introduction to concepts that will be explored in more detail during classroom and hands-on training. After completing the full training program, you will be on your way to a great career as a shoreside container gantry crane operator.
You know, the music industry's changed a lot over the years, and so has the longshore industry. New inventions in both industries have made the jobs easier and more exciting.
Before the mid-1950s, longshore workers handled cargo one item at a time, putting each object in a box, on a pallet, or in a net or sling. Cargo was handled and rehandled several times. It could take a week or more to load or unload a single ship. With the introduction of the standardized intermodal cargo container, cargo handling was dramatically changed. Cargo could now be transported from its origin to its destination without being disturbed during transit. This method resulted in increased efficiency, reduced costs, and enhanced cargo security. Today, about 90% of the world's trade moves in containers. Every year, 100 million containers cross the world's oceans. With the introduction of containers came the need for specialized cranes to handle them. Cranes are machines for lifting or moving heavy loads with a projecting arm or boom. Shoreside container cranes were developed to load and discharge containers to and from ships. They have been modernized for faster, safer, and more efficient loading and discharging. Today, the shoreside container gantry crane is the crane you'll see being used at marine terminals. The shoreside crane is also referred to as a wharf or dockside crane. The shoreside crane is an efficient machine that can handle hundreds of containers a day.
Now, in most bands, the drums set the rhythm for the rest of the musicians to follow. And as a crane operator, you also set the pace for your team. But in order to do so, you need to know a little bit about your instrument, the shoreside gantry crane.
Shoreside means that the crane is located on the shore or land next to the water. This area is called the dock, wharf, or pier. Gantry describes the way the crane travels sideways along specialized tracks built into the dock. This movement allows the crane to work different areas of a ship that is secured or moored to the dock in a berth. There may be a number of vessels moored in berths, with several cranes working each vessel at the same time. The crane itself is a steel structure in a modified A-frame design that can rise up to 150 feet. The A-frame structure is supported by waterside or front legs and landside or rear legs. Under each leg are sets of powered railroad-type wheels that allow the crane to gantry along the tracks. Each set of legs, both waterside and landside, are joined by a horizontal crossbeam called a sill beam, which is located near the dock surface just above the crane wheels. Sill beams help provide structural stability. Portal beams are another type of horizontal crossbeam. They join the waterside and landside legs approximately 60 feet above the dock surface. Positioned perpendicular to the sill beams, they further secure the structure and are located high enough to allow yard tractors, straddle carriers, and other equipment handlers to work under the crane. The boom is the horizontal arm-like component that extends out over the water's edge and the vessel. The term outreach refers to how far the boom extends over the water. The phrase between the legs refers to the area in between the crane's waterside and landside legs. This is where container handling equipment brings containers to be loaded on the ship and where they take away containers discharged from the crane. This area is also referred to as under the hook. The term backreach refers to the area behind the landside legs. The trolley is the mechanism that moves along the boom to and from the ship. Using hoist ropes, the trolley suspends the head block to which the spreader is attached. The spreader locks onto containers and permits their lifting and lowering. Trolley is also the term that refers to the back and forth movement of the trolley mechanism and spreader along the boom to position the spreader above a container. The operator's cab is usually attached to the rear of the trolley and rides with the trolley when it moves. However, in some cranes, the cab rides separately. The operator's cab is where you will carry out the movements and functions of the crane, such as gantry, trolley, and hoist. Hoist is the term for the vertical upward or downward movement of the container or load. The cab has been designed to give you maximum visibility, allowing you to look around in many directions, including downward. It is typically heated and air-conditioned for the operator's comfort. The machinery house is another important part of the shoreside crane. It contains the electrical control panels, drums, motors, gear reducers, and brakes that allow the crane to perform its functions. On some models, the machinery house may contain diesel engines, fuel tanks, and generators. Cranes with a diesel-powered engine use it to generate electricity to power the crane's functions. This system of power is generally used at ports that do not have an adequate source for electric power. Today, most cranes are electrically powered using a trailing high-voltage power cable which lies in a trough near the waterside legs of the crane. Some cranes have a horizontal elevated collector bar or third rail system that is mounted on poles about 30 feet above the dock near the landside legs of the crane. Always be aware of the potential danger of working near or under these electrical supply systems. They typically carry from 4 to 15,000 volts. To reach the machinery house and the cab, the operator uses a ladder and stairway, or in some models, a personnel lift or elevator. These are located on the legs.
Now, bands transport the cargo they need in a vehicle, but the cargo you work with is transported by a special type of ship called a container ship.
Certain terms are used to describe container ships. The pointed front end of a ship is called the bow. Forward means in the direction of the bow. The flat rear end is the stern. Aft means in the direction of the stern. The left side, when looking toward the bow, is port, and the right side is starboard. Athwartship means across the ship from port to starboard. Levels on a ship are called decks. Stairways are ladders, and walls are bulkheads. Access to a ship in port is by gangway or accommodation ladder. Container ships that fit through the Panama Canal are called Panamax, while post-Panamax ships are too large to fit through the canal's locks. Post-Panamax ships fit at least 14 containers across the deck and can carry 6,000 TEUs or more. TEU stands for 20-foot equivalent unit. This is the term used to describe container volume. One 20-foot container equals 1 TEU, while a 40-foot container equals 2 TEUs. To load and unload these giant post-Panamax ships, shoreside cranes had to get bigger too. The new cranes are taller, lifting containers up to 120 feet high, with longer booms that can reach out nearly 200 feet over the water, almost 85 feet further from the dock than previous cranes. The term cargo bay describes the stowage areas above and below deck. Containers can be tiered up to 7 high on the weather deck of the ship. Containers must be secured so they don't break loose and fall overboard during ocean transport. Lashing gear consisting of twist locks, rods, turnbuckles, bridge fittings, and other assorted loose gear is used for this purpose. Containers are also stowed below the weather deck in cargo storage areas called holds. The openings into these holes are called hatches, and they are covered by large hatch covers which protect the containers from the weather and prevent the hold from filling up with water. Most modern container ships have cell guides that align and secure containers in the hold during ocean transport. While container ships are designed to maximize the amount of space available for container storage, there are areas dedicated to necessary ship functions. The house is where the ship's crew operates and where the bridge is located. The bridge is where navigation functions take place. The crew's quarters and the galley are also located in the house. Below deck is the engine room. As a crane operator, you should be particularly aware of the following areas of the ship while operating: smokestacks, the house, radar, gangways, and any other areas where personnel may be boarding or working, such as vehicular access ramps and any on-deck walkways.
Each person in a rock band needs to know how their job fits into the team. In order to understand how the job of a crane operator fits into the cargo handling process, you should be familiar with the layout of the marine terminal.
At the entrance of the terminal is the gate complex where motor carriers enter to pick up or deliver cargo. Containers and chassis are identified, verified, and inspected here. The container yard is where containers discharged from a ship and containers to be loaded onto a ship are brought. Each terminal has its own procedures for storing containers. Some terminals have wheeled operations areas where containers are stored on chassis. Other terminals stack their containers on the ground. That's referred to as grounded operations. And some terminals might have both wheeled and grounded operations areas. There are also areas at the terminal designated for certain cargo, such as hazardous materials and specialized cargo. Refrigerated or reefer cargo has separate areas for loading, unloading, and storing. Reefers are containers fitted with a generator that can produce power to maintain a desired temperature. When in the container yard, reefers can get power by being hooked up to outlet stations that are strategically located in the reefer area.
To have a successful band, I have to be able to depend on the other band members to do their part the right way at the right time. And the same applies to the longshore team. Everybody has to work together to get the job done well.
The longshore team is made up of workers with many different job functions. Everyone on the team has the same goal, to safely and efficiently move cargo where it needs to be, when it needs to be there. The stevedore supervises cargo operations for the entire ship, which might be worked by several cranes. The longshore workers who work together to load cargo on or discharge cargo from a ship are usually called a container gang. Each gang may have a hatch boss, foreman, header, or gang carrier. This individual directs the activity of the container gang or crew. The shoreside crane operator is responsible for the safe loading and unloading of a ship and works closely with the container gang. Dockmen are the workers on the dock who prepare the containers or equipment for loading or discharge. Lashers secure cargo aboard ships. Make sure you know where these workers are at all times. Their safety depends on it. The signal person, or spotter, notes arriving container handling equipment and communicates relevant information to crane operators. They may also provide important information about container movements from or to the vessel. Operators of powered industrial trucks, such as yard tractors and straddle carriers, deliver and receive containers at the dock. These operators work closely with ground personnel. The ship's supervisor or superintendent is a management employee who oversees operations with safety, efficiency, and productivity as top priorities. The checker or hatch checker checks and records container data, makes sure the right containers are loaded, and ensures that the right containers are discharged from the ship. Gearmen maintain, inspect, select, and deliver cargo handling equipment such as slings, shackles, and dumbbells. Crane mechanics take care of the startup, shutdown, and maintenance of the cranes, while other mechanics perform the same function for other terminal equipment. The crew of the ship generally does not participate in cargo operations. That is the work of longshore workers. Ship personnel are responsible for operating the ship while in port. The chief mate supervises all deck operations. The ship's master, also known as the ship's captain, oversees and is responsible for all shipboard personnel and the ship as a whole.
Making the transition from just being a regular old guitar picker to being a serious artist means knowing your instrument inside and out. If you want to get serious about becoming an artist in the crane, you need to understand how the crane functions, what it can do.
On a conventional boom crane, the boom is hinged just forward of the machinery house. When not in use, the boom can be raised and stowed in a near vertical position. This helps prevent the boom from being damaged when a ship enters or leaves the berth. On a shuttle boom crane, the boom slides in and out horizontally. The boom is retracted when the crane is not in use. Shuttle booms are necessary in areas near airports where a conventional crane's height might interfere with aviation. The typical shoreside container crane will have several motors to power the four main operating systems, which are boom, gantry, trolley, and hoist. Hoist motors operate the boom hoist, the main hoist, and one or more auxiliary hoist drums. These drums are spool-like cylinders which usually have grooves to guide wire hoist ropes. On conventional cranes, the boom is raised or lowered by boom hoist ropes that are reeved through a sheave assembly attached near the tip of the boom and through sheaves located near the top of the A-frame. The rope ends at the boom hoist drum in the machinery house. The boom must be down horizontal to the dock in order to perform lifting operations. When hoisting a load, the hoist motor turns a gear reducer which is attached to the hoist drum. The gear reducer slows the fast speed of the motor to a speed appropriate for the turning drum. Along with slowing motor speed, the gear reducer enables an increase in torque or turning power, which gives the drum the power necessary to do its work. Typically, the hoist ropes run from the main hoist drum along the inside of the boom to the trolley. Here, the rope runs through sheaves and then down to a head block and back up through the trolley back to a point near the boom tip. As the rope is spooled onto the drum, the head block is lifted. When rope is spooling off the drum, the head block is lowered. The spreader is attached to the head block. The head block and spreader assembly handled the maximum safe working load of the crane. Power to the spreader is provided by an umbilical cord which runs from the machinery house to the spreader. The operator must make sure that the umbilical cord never becomes pinched or caught on the spreader or any part of the ship. The hoist ropes and trolley tow ropes are wire ropes. Wire ropes are composed of individual steel wires which are laid into strands. These strands are then wound around a core to form the wire rope. While wire rope may seem very strong, and it is strong, it is also easily damaged, especially when under the stress of a load. Sudden starts and stops can cause impact stresses. Allowing the rope to rub against anything can cause the individual wires to part and reduce the strength of the rope. As a crane operator, much of your work involves the functions of the crane's spreader. Spreader beams retract and extend to adjust to the size of standard containers, which can be 20, 40, or 45 feet long. Spreaders can also lift open top, flat rack, ventilated, high cubes, refrigerated, tank, liquid containers, and dry cargo containers. Flippers are located at each corner of the spreader, one flipper per corner. Flippers extend down below the spreader and are flared outward at their bottoms so they can guide the spreader onto a container. On a typical spreader, the flippers work as inshore and offshore pairs. While there are separate toggle switches to activate each pair of flippers, the toggle switches can be activated together to raise or lower all 4 flippers at once. Newer cranes have the ability to activate the flippers individually or in a variety of combinations. Twist locks are also located on the bottom of each corner of the spreader. These mechanisms fit and lock into the upper 4 corner fittings of a container. In addition to the extend and retract features, the spreader has other adjustments that allow for flexibility when engaging containers. List controls allow the spreader to be tilted to one side to better align to a container. This may occur when aligning to a container aboard a ship that is listing. Trim controls allow the spreader to adjust to a container. These controls may be used when a container is heavier on one side and causes the spreader to dip when lifted. Skew is an adjustment to allow the spreader to engage a container that is out of alignment. Typically, the spreader can be rotated to make fine adjustments before landing on a container. This may be necessary for working the deck of a ship or when a yard tractor is not properly aligned.
My guess is that working in your operator's cab is similar to performing on stage. Like a band, your viewpoint allows you to see what's going on around you and you can react to the people below. Let's take a closer look at your stage.
The cab of your shoreside crane will be equipped with control levers, toggle switches, indicator lights, on-off switches, and buttons. Their location may vary depending on the make and model of the crane, so you should become familiar with the placement and function of the controls in the crane you operate. The control power on button that turns on the power to the cab is located next to the emergency stop button, which can be on the left or right control console. The left control console is where you will typically find the control lever for trolley movement. The gantry and hoist control levers are generally located on the right control console. The flipper up-down switch, the spreader extend-retract switch, twist lock indicators, and the list, trim, and skew spreader adjustment switches may be on the left or right control console depending on your crane. The main console typically houses system condition and fault display indicator lights. If the crane's wind speed indicating system transmits directly to the cab, the readout will generally be located on the main console. If the crane is fitted with a load indicating device, its readout will likely be on the main console as well. The cab is also equipped with 1 or 2 radios for important communications. One of these radios, usually referred to as the stevedore radio, is used to communicate with gang members about the loading and discharging of the ship. The other radio is used to communicate with crane maintenance personnel. Cranes with only 1 radio will have 2 channels for these communications.
Bands have to follow rules to keep them from getting hurt on stage and to make sure the music's played right. Cranes and their operators are also subject to rules that keep workers safe and allow operators to do their job properly.
The construction, maintenance, and operation of container cranes is regulated by several entities. In the United States, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, has implemented certain regulations for container cranes. There are extensive OSHA regulations for crane owners and operators. Your local training will discuss them in further detail. However, most notably, OSHA sets the requirements for inspections and weight testing of the crane. Every year, the crane is inspected by an OSHA-accredited independent agency. And every 4 years, OSHA requires a quadrennial inspection in which every component of the crane is thoroughly inspected and an overload test is performed. Regular daily and monthly inspections are performed by terminal crane maintenance personnel. In addition, crane manufacturers have recommendations regarding the operation and use of their specific crane. Become familiar with the manufacturer's recommendations for the crane you will operate. Each terminal also has its own safety guidelines which may be specific only to that terminal. These may include emergency procedures or safety policies, which may be more stringent than the regulations of other agencies. This program introduced you to the shoreside container gantry crane, its characteristics, and how it functions. We discussed container ships, the terminal, and the longshore team. And we covered the controls and indicator lights you will find in the cab. Lastly, you learned about the different entities that regulate crane safety.
When you think about it, our worlds are really not that far apart. We both have great equipment to handle, great team to work with, the chance to perform. And I believe that you can be a true artist in your profession.